The blizzard hit the valley like a wall of ice, and by nightfall, the temperature dropped to 40 degrees below zero. Shingled roofs leaked heat through every seam, and inside the drafty houses, families shivered under blankets while frost spread across the walls. But at the edge of town, one house burned with a golden light, the grass-roofed cabin of Margaret Kenning, the widow they had called a disgrace.
Margaret, for God's sake, open the door. We're freezing to death out here.
Please, I was wrong about your roof. Just let us inside.
We shouldn't have mocked you. I'm sorry. Just give us a chance.
The door opened a crack, and Margaret Kenning looked out at the shivering crowd.
So now you remember the meadow roof. After years of calling me a disgrace.
When the deadliest cold left only her home warm, the neighbors who mocked her came knocking, begging to learn the secret they had scorned. But to understand how that moment came, you have to go back to the summer she first tore the shingles off her roof. 3 months after she buried her husband, Margaret Kenning climbed onto her roof and began tearing away the shingles with a crowbar. She didn't explain. She just walked to the low meadow and began cutting thick strips of grass and roots, the way her grandmother had taught her in the old country.
She's growing a meadow on her roof. I've never seen such a disgrace. A roof is meant to keep the weather out, not become a pasture. What will she do when it rains?
Maybe she plans to graze us a cow up there. Ah, a grass roof. Next, she'll be putting flowers in her chimney.
Laugh. But when the north wind comes, I won't be the one shivering.
The town named it Meadow House. Children threw clods of dirt at her walls, and even the postmaster shook his head when she walked by. But Margaret pressed the earth flat with her bare hands, layer by layer, until the roof was 2 feet thick with living sod. By the end of summer, the grass had rooted deep, and the cabin seemed to breathe, but the town saw nothing except weeds. That summer, the sun scorched the valley, but inside Margaret's cabin, the air stayed cool as a root cellar. The living roof drank the heat and gave nothing back.
Let them swelter in their hothouses. This is right.
I hear old lady Kenning's roof is a foot thick with mud. Probably full of worms by now. Worms and weeds. That's all she's got up there.
Mushrooms, worms, but not frost, not frozen tears.
The grass on her roof grew thick, woven with wildflower roots. From a distance, it looked like a piece of the meadow lifted onto the log walls. Walking through town, Margaret noticed how people pulled their children aside when she passed. The grass roof had made her contagious.
They don't know, do they, Truss? The old ways kept my grandmother's family alive through winters that froze rivers solid.
The sod grew thick, its roots a heavy blanket. No one noticed what she was building.
When the cold comes, they'll wish for a meadow on their roof.
Autumn turned, and the first snow fell on the valley. On Margaret's roof, the grass stood stiff and white, but underneath, the earth held the day's thin warmth.
It's holding, just like grandmother said.
Inside Nora's house, the cold came early. Frost traced the corners of the ceiling, and the stove ate wood without mercy.
I don't understand. We sealed every crack last autumn. Why is it so cold in here?
She pressed a hand to the wall above her bed and felt the chill bleeding through the shingles.
My ma's cough won't ease up. These shingle roofs are like sieves.
Words spread in quiet tones. The meadow house stayed warm, its windows clear of frost.
They're starting to notice, but pride won't let them speak.
Nobody knocked on her door. Nobody apologized. But when the wind bit down, a few looked toward the green roof with something other than disgust.
Let winter come. We're ready, Truss.
The blizzard returned harder, and the temperature plunged until the town's water pump froze solid.
We can't keep the schoolhouse warm. The children are coughing, and the firewood is almost gone.
My sister's baby won't stop crying from the cold. She's up all night just trying to keep her warm.
Ice formed on the inside walls of Samuel's cabin, thick as window glass. The fire in the stove gave no warmth.
Pa, I'll fetch more wood, but it won't matter if the roof keeps bleeding all the heat out.
Outside Margaret's window, the blizzard howled, but inside, the fire burned steady, and the air held the day's warmth.
The sod is doing its work. I can hear the wind tearing at the walls, but I can't feel it at all.
The thermometer outside the general store read 45 below zero, the coldest anyone in the valley could remember.
This ain't a normal winter. People are going to die if it doesn't break soon.
Through it all, Margaret's cabin held its heat, a secret the town was too stubborn to learn. The cold deepened until the air itself seemed to crack, and it was Nora, the loudest critic, who first saw the truth.
Look at Kenning's house. Not a speck of frost on her windows. How is that possible?
The glass of Margaret's cabin glowed clear as spring, while every other window in town was thick with ice.
Mayor Thornton, I think we've all been blind. That grass roof might actually be keeping her warm.
Nora, it can't be. A sod roof, that's mud and weeds.
Then why is her house the only one not covered in ice? My own grandchild is freezing, and I am too proud to admit I might be wrong.
The mayor looked toward the cabin, his breath clouding in the frozen air. He hadn't wanted to see it, but the evidence was there.
If it's true, but no, we can't go begging to the woman we mocked.
And if we don't, how many will die before the thaw?
That question hung in the silence as the wind screamed on, and still no one moved toward the meadow house. The shingle roofs gave no more, and by nightfall, families abandoned their frozen houses.
We can't stay. I'll carry the little ones. Follow me to Kenning's place.
It's that or freeze. We have to ask her.
They fought through drifts to the cabin's door, the wind slicing at their faces.
Margaret Kenning, in the name of mercy, open up. We've got children freezing to death.
We were wrong about the roof. Forgive our pride. Just let us inside.
Inside, Margaret stood by the fire, listening to the desperate pounding on her door.
They mocked me for years. They called my home a disgrace. But there are children out there.
Her hand hovered over the latch. Outside, the blizzard howled, a beast that would swallow them all. The weight of the choice pressed on her, and still she stood frozen, the latch untouched. Margaret pulled the latch, and the door swung wide. Warm light spilled into the snow, and the desperate crowd stumbled forward. The heat of the cabin wrapped around them, sudden as a blow. Men who had not felt their faces for hours stood speechless.
Bless you, Margaret. We were fools. Every one of us.
How is this possible? My own house hasn't been this warm since autumn.
It's the roof, the meadow roof you all mocked.
They looked up, and for the first time, they saw the thick mat of roots and earth not as a disgrace, but as a shield.
I owe you an apology, Margaret Kenning. This whole town does. We judged what we didn't understand.
They're only here because they had nowhere else. But maybe they'll listen now.
The shame in their faces was as deep as the cold had been. But Margaret said nothing more. She only stirred the fire. For the first time in days, the townspeople felt the ache leave their bones, but they also felt the weight of their own contempt pressing down. The cabin was too small to hold them all. Shoulders pressed against the walls, and the fire could not warm every outstretched hand.
We need more room. I'll teach you to build a sod shelter. The earth holds heat, same as my roof. We'll lean it against the cabin.
You want us to go back out into that? Show us what to do.
Margaret pulled her kerchief tight and opened the door. The men followed her into the storm.
Dig here. Stack the sod blocks like bricks. Pack every seam with snow and roots.
They hacked at the frozen ground, lifting thick blocks of tangled roots and soil.
It's freezing my hands, but if this saves my family, I'll dig until I drop.
Margaret moved among them, pressing seams shut with her calloused fingers.
Tighten that corner. A gap no wider than your finger will bleed the warmth right out.
The shelter's walls rose slowly against the cabin, and inside, the children watched through the window, their breath misting the glass. By nightfall, the last sod block was set, and a thin trail of smoke rose from the shelter's chimney.
Everyone inside. Keep close together. The walls will hold the heat if we stay still.
The shelter smelled of damp earth and frozen roots, but the air was still. The wind outside could not reach them.
It's not freezing in here. The dirt is keeping us warm. I never would have believed it.
I can feel my fingers again. This is better than my own house, with its shingle roof.
Outside, the blizzard clawed at the walls, but the packed earth drank the cold and gave back only silence. Hour after hour, they huddled together. The children slept for the first time in 3 days.
They'll never mock the grass again. Not after this.
A pale pink light seeped through the cracks, and the wind had died to a whisper. The door of the shelter creaked open, and the survivors stumbled into the frozen morning. Alive, the blizzard had passed, leaving the town buried under a silence so deep it felt like the earth was holding its breath.
I'll never forgive myself for the way we treated you. You saved my grandchild. You saved all of us. How can we ever repay that?
The town owes you a debt, Margaret Kenning. We were blind, and you showed us something our shingles never could.
You've learned something. That's enough for now. But trust isn't rebuilt in a single night. The cold will pass, but the shame will take longer.
The townspeople, hollow-eyed and humbled, began the long walk back to their frozen homes. But before they left, many glanced back at the grass roof, frostbitten, but alive, seeing it for the first time as something other than a disgrace.
You see, Truss? They finally looked.
The thaw was still far off, but the ice between them had cracked. A week after the blizzard, the townspeople came again to the meadow house, not to beg but to listen.
This is no odd notion of mine. Turf roofs have sheltered my people for 1,000 years. In the old country, we built them thick, earth and roots woven tight, and they held the winter out when nothing else could. The grass and soil breathe, insulating like a blanket. It worked for my grandmother, and it works now.
And we called it a disgrace. I am ashamed, Mrs. Kenning. Will you teach us how to do the same?
Teach us all. The town will listen now. We need this knowledge.
I will teach anyone who comes with willing hands. The earth doesn't care about pride.
She promised to show them come spring, and for the first time, the meadow roof was seen not as a folly, but as inheritance. The old book stayed open on her table, its drawings of turf houses across the sea, a testament to wisdom that had outlasted empires. And beneath the snow, the green shoots of Margaret's roof waited for spring, ready to prove that the oldest knowledge was often the warmest. Spring came sudden, and the snow melted fast. The town gathered at the mayor's house with shovels and willing hands.
This day marks a change, Margaret. We'll follow your lead.
Remember, the strips must be cut thick. Roots, not just grass, and seal every seam.
The old shingles were tossed aside, and the first heavy sod blocks were heaved onto the roof.
I used to joke about worms up here. Now I am planting them myself.
Press it flat. No gap wider than a seed will forgive you. Come winter.
By noon, the green blankets spread across half the roof, and children cheered from the street. Those who had once called it a disgrace climbed up to lend their hands.
They see now. The old knowledge is alive again.
At dusk, the first new sod roof was finished, and a soft rain fell on the tender grass. By midsummer, the town wore a new color. Green roofs spread down the street like a promise kept. Children who once threw clods at the meadow house now played under its eaves, their parents nodding to Margaret as she passed.
I was the loudest voice against her. Now look at me, knee-deep in sod.
My house is finally warm. My wife didn't cough once this spring. All because of a meadow.
The stores that once sold extra shingles now advertised root cutter tools and offered free advice from Margaret's book. Strangers traveling through the valley stopped to stare at the living roofs, and the townsfolk would smile and point toward Margaret's cabin.
From disgrace to desire, the old country is here now.
Families that had once shunned her now left baskets of bread on her step, never staying long. But the message was clear, and on the warmest evenings, the whole town smelled of fresh-cut grass from above, a scent no one would ever mock again. The meadow roof was no longer her shame. It was the town's shield. A late frost crept into the valley one crisp morning, turning the fields white. But inside the sod-roofed houses, the air stayed warm.
The frost can't bite through the earth. It never could.
Not a single family complained of cold last night. The green roofs proved themselves again. It's time we honor Margaret Kenning properly. A gathering in the town square so everyone can thank her.
A ceremony. After all this, can I stand in that light?
The last skeptics felt the warmth for themselves and fell silent. The town knew now. The meadow roof was no accident.
If they want to learn, I'll teach them. A gathering might help.
Next Saturday then, the whole town will be there.
Margaret nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. The woman who had been called a disgrace would be honored by the very people who once shunned her. The frost melted by noon, but the memory of that cold snap would linger, reminding them all why the grass grew on their roofs. The town square filled with the soft rustle of Sunday crowds, and at its center stood Margaret Kenning, sober beneath the green rooftops.
We called your house a disgrace, Margaret. Today we call it our salvation. Accept this bell. Let it ring every time the cold comes to remind us of the warmth you gave.
I was the first to mock. Let me be the first to thank you. Your roof saved my grandchild. I owe you a debt no bell can ring away.
My little girl is alive because of you, Mrs. Kenning. I'll never call it a meadow again.
I only did what my grandmother taught me. The earth is the real teacher. The old ways kept my family warm across the sea. Now they keep you warm here.
The crowd broke into applause that rolled down the street, past every green roof, until it seemed the whole valley was speaking her name. Margaret looked past them all to the grass on her cabin, and in that moment, she knew her husband would have been proud. Evening after the ceremony, Margaret walked alone up the hillside to the small plot, where her husband lay.
I did what we talked about. The turf roof. It worked, Eric. Just like you said it would. They called it a disgrace, but now they call it salvation. The whole town has green roofs now.
Trust settled beside her, and the wind carried the scent of fresh grass from the valley below.
Your mother's book came to life again. The old ways kept them warm through the worst winter. I wish you could have seen their faces. You'd be proud.
She knelt and pressed her hand to the wooden marker, the same way she pressed the sod into place. For a long moment, she was still, and the silence felt like an answer.
I am home now, Eric. In more ways than one, Truss and I will be all right.
The last light caught the new green chute on her cabin's roof, and somewhere in the valley, a bell began to ring. Seasons turned, and the green roofs spread until no house wore bare shingles. The old cabin of Margaret Kenning stood at the heart, its thick sod roof as dark and deep as the day she laid it. Strangers passing through the valley spoke of a town where the roofs grew grass and the winters held no dread. They called it the Turf Town, and travelers came to see how earth and root could turn a house into a home. Children who had never known a winter without the green roof played in the shade of eaves that smelled of wildflowers. And on the coldest nights, no frost touched the windows because the earth remembered the sun. Margaret grew old in her cabin, and the town grew old around her. But the grass on the roofs was always young. When she finally passed, they laid her beside Eric on the hill, and from her grave, you could see the living roofs unfurling below. The bell she had been given still rang on the first day of winter, a reminder of the warmth she had given. But the meadow roof had become so much more than a symbol. It was the town's breath, its shield, its legacy. The story of Margaret Kenning and the meadow roof did not end with her passing. Children learned it at their mother's knees, the tale of the woman who planted grass on her roof and saved a town. On winter nights, families still gathered and told how the disgrace became the warmest home in the valley. The grass still grew on every roof, thick and green, a living memory of the old country brought across the sea. Nora, in her old age, taught her granddaughters to cut sod and pack the seams, speaking Margaret's name with reverence. The book of turf houses, its pages worn soft, passed from hand to hand like sacred text. And each first day of winter, the town bell tolled in remembrance of the warmth she gave. No one in the valley ever again called a grass roof the disgrace. The oldest knowledge had become the newest tradition, and the meadow roof was the heart of it. Margaret Kenning's name was etched not in stone, but in the living roots that sheltered every home. And in the silent heart of the town, the original cabin still stood, its roof a deep mat of green and brown. Winter snow settled on the grass, then melted into spring rain, and each year the roots grew deeper. The cabin never lost its warmth, as if the earth itself remembered the hands that had pressed it into place. In summer, wildflowers bloomed across the sod, tiny shouts of color against the deep green. Autumn turned the roof to copper and gold, and still the house held its heat. The seasons passed over the roof, like a hand over a beloved book, each turn a memory. No one lived in the cabin anymore, but its door was never locked, and its hearth never grew cold. Travelers would stop and press a hand to the thick sod, feeling the pulse of 100 winters held in the roots. The grass on the roof was a quiet reminder that the oldest answers are often right beneath our feet, and so the meadow roof remained, not as a relic, but as a breath, a blanket, and a promise. The valley never forgot. Other settlements learned the turf roof, and when hard winters came, they were ready. Shingle roofs failed, but the green-roofed houses held their warmth, and no family froze. Families carried the tradition westward, planting grass on new homes and teaching neighbors. Children grew up, never knowing frost on their walls, because the earth above remembered the sun. In the deepest cold, the wind passed over the roofs without finding a seam to slip through. The grass had shown that mockery could become a lifeline, and that wisdom often lay right underfoot. On the original cabin, the sod held through blizzards and thaws, the roots growing thicker each year. The door was never locked. The fire was kept lit, a haven for any lost in the cold. On winter nights, a bell still rang faintly, a reminder of the widow who planted a meadow, and the grass kept growing, a quiet promise that as long as the earth held, the warmth would never leave. From the hillside, the town lay spread below at sunset, every roof a deep green mat against the golden light. No bare shingle remained. The earth had taken the high ground, and the town breathed under its living blanket. The bell tolled once, a long note that carried across the valley, a sound of warmth and remembrance. Travelers passing through learned the way of the sod, took it onward, and another settlement would be ready for winter. Families pointed with pride at their green roofs, the legacy of a widow who had been called a disgrace. The grass grew thick, the roots deepened, and the old secret became the frontier's shield. In the coldest nights, frost never touched the windows, because the earth remembered the sun, and the memory of Margaret Kenning settled into the soil, a seed that would never die. A quiet truth, older than the town, had taken root and would not be forgotten. Sometimes, the oldest knowledge is the warmest.